Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm here joined with the director of the new film, First We Bomb New Mexico. This is Lois. This is Lois Lipman. Lois, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. It's so great to be back here with you, Jacques.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I think we're just going to have the most fun today. The film premiered at the Santa Fe International Film Fest in October, and it went on to win the Audience Choice Award as well as the award by the jury for Best New Mexico Documentary. And then the very next week, it debuted at the Austin Film Festival and took home a documentary award there as well.
Yeah, it took home, I'm so proud to say, the best documentary of the Austin Film Festival.
Bravo, well earned, and I'm so glad that kind of shows that the film is not a local film. It is touching people well outside the area, and
Well, that was the litmus test, Jacques, because, I mean, firstly, I could not have predicted the warmth and exuberance of the screenings in Santa Fe. I mean, it was like a homecoming, and it was really joyous and just a thrilling. But then after it occurred, I went, well, of course, this is our hometown. And of course, this story really is without a doubt a local story, as well as in other states. But Austin, Texas, that's a whole nother story. They don't have this connection with the Downwinders tragedy, and for it to resonate there so very deeply, the audience was unbelievable. They loved it, and people were stopping us everywhere to talk. Everybody wanted to talk, to ask questions. So, like you said, Jacques, winning this award in Austin, which also is a great film festival, creates additional momentum and, kind of launches us to move forward. And we got some great reviews, and all of that helps.
this is from the Santa Fe Reporter. Academic, scientific, and political commentary throughout the film, along with historic footage, bolster the personal stories to create an irrefutable and excoriating chronology of environmental justice. Although one that feels overly compressed at moments. Despite their documented suffering, New Mexico downwinders and pre-1971 uranium workers don't receive coverage through the Federal Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, despite years of efforts to secure that small amount of justice. Central to those efforts, consortium co-founder, downwinder, and cancer survivor Tina Cordova, whose steadfast determination to find justice for her community emerges as the film's beating heart. We're not going to be martyrs anymore, Cordova tells attendees at one of the countless meetings where she speaks. They counted on us to be unsophisticated, uneducated, and unable to speak up for ourselves. We're not those people anymore. While the U.S. Senate in July passed an amendment to expand RECA, which sunsets in June 2024 to cover New Mexico victims, the amendment's prospects in the House remain uncertain. Someone should lock the members in a room and force them to watch this film, Tina Cordova says, and remain steadfast. Lois, tell us a little bit about Tina. I know you spoke about her on the last show. How did she feel about the final product of the movie? What was it like having her at these screenings, at the Trinity site, all of that?
Tina's amazing. I just never stop being amazed by the strength, the beauty, the focus, the knowledge of Tina Cordova. She's a hero. In fact, Tina just flew to Washington, D.C. a couple days ago to accept the Hero of the Year award from Physicians for Social Responsibility. And in a few weeks, Tina's going to fly to New York to the UN to receive the Hero of the Year award there from ICANN. So Tina is really becoming recognized, even though she has been steadfast on and determined on her mission for acknowledgement for her unacknowledged people for 18 years. So this certainly hasn't happened overnight. And Tina's watched every version of the film that we've made, and we've made a lot. And we always have dialogue with Tina, and I love it. She's so attentive, and she loves the film. So that, of course, is the most important thing, that Tina and the other downwinders feel good about the film. I couldn't make the film except for them to feel that their voice is being amplified and they're finally being seen and heard. And that was our goal.
Lois, this is from the Albuquerque Journal. The headline is Journey to Healing. Director Lois Lipman tells the other side of Trinity site test with First We Bomb New Mexico. I fell in love with New Mexico and I was attracted by the richness, Lipman says. I had a whole career in London and I worked in documentaries. When I moved to New Mexico, I discovered the story of the downwinders, the people living close to the Trinity site who have now multi-generational cancers. I knew I had to create a film that tells this tragic story. First We Bomb New Mexico follows formidable Hispanic cancer survivor Tina Cordova banging on the corridors of power to fight for compensation and an apology for Native and Hispanic communities in New Mexico whose land and water was radiated by the Trinity bomb. You know, they use some amazing pictures. It goes on to say, it's the story Oppenheimer doesn't tell, Lipman says. I'm glad it's coming out after the film, which had a lot of success this summer. Lipman is also elated for the film having its world premiere. It's newsworthy that our film premieres the day before thousands of tourists flock to White Sands to witness the location of that blast, Lipman says. They are expecting many times more tourists than before because of the popularity of Oppenheimer. Networks have already said that they will fly to New Mexico from New York City to report on this story. At the same time, tourists flock to the site. On the side of the dusty road will be the downwinders with placards trying to tell the tourists that there is another narrative to the story that is not told inside those secure lock gates. Lipman says she wanted to premiere the documentary in Santa Fe because it's a film about New Mexicans and their resilience. It was a passion project for Lipman. It took nearly a decade to raise the money for the film, although it was excruciating at the beginning trying to get support, but now this year things have very much shifted. We've gotten grants and support from grants and the support of this community. Grantors are even stepping forward, Lipman says. People like George R.R. Martin's wife, Parrot McBride, is helping to host the reception for the film. And locally, people are stepping up to help the word, she says. And God, that's a great picture of you they used in the Albuquerque Journal. I really love the way they did it in print since it was just this big 2-page spread. Congrats on all the local coverage. I think the New Mexican, the Albuquerque Journal, the Santa Fe Reporter all took the time to interview you to really get some nice quotes and understood the significance of this film and its premiere.
Yeah, the press is a very, very important part of all of this. You know, without the press, the story wouldn't be told. And without the story being told widely, the downwinders are not going to be, their story is not going to be acknowledged. And justice in Congress, which will happen, but it's the press and it's film festivals. It's like you, Jacques, you know, selecting us for your film festival and giving us so much exposure for sold out screenings. You were just always there to give us more help and more encouragement and more support. And it was just a tremendous experience. It also is when you look backwards and reflect, it's like the building of relationships. The relationships started a very, very long time ago. For me with the Downwinders, but for Tina with the press. It's not really like we're coming at them cold. They are rallying and supporting their movement, and they want to play a role. You know, they're invested in our state. And I have already heard from 2 national journalists who also have promised stories. But I wanted to say I came out of journalism myself, and I'm passionate about the importance of independent journalists, stories that maybe are not comfortable for everybody to see or to know the truth about. And in other countries, even in the United States, they die for, you know, their work. There are a lot of heroes involved in this.
Lois, it was so fun to see you at the party on Saturday night at the festival and tell you about how the Associated Press picked up the movie and it ran in hundreds of newspapers internationally. And I ran into you and I said, Lois, look at this. The Associated Press picked it up.
I was so tickled. I was so excited. You started scrolling down this paper, Seattle, what is it, intelligence, just Hawaiian, and it was just really an experience. And you reflected on how the first time you were written about like that, it also was really, you know, thrilling. You remember that?
Yeah, it makes you feel like what you're doing is really newsworthy
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
enough so that people all over the world are reading about it.
Yeah.
And the headline is Visitors Tour New Mexico Site in Likely Record Attendance. The group says the US government never warned residents about the testing. Radioactive ash contaminated soil and water. Rates of infant mortality, cancer, and other illnesses increase. There are younger generations dealing with health issues now, advocates say. The Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium has been working with the Union of Concerned Scientists and others for years to bring attention to the Manhattan Project's impact. A new documentary by filmmaker Lois Lipman, First We Bombed New Mexico, made its world premiere at the Santa Fe International Film Festival. The notoriety from Oppenheimer has been embraced in Los Alamos for more than 200 miles north of the Tularosa Basin. About 200 locals, many of them were extras in the film. Lois, yeah, the Associated Press took notice. There was also a wonderful article in the Austin Chronicle, which we'll get to next. Was Joel, were the people on your team? Sorry, Joel is the editor of the film. What's
Yeah.
his
And
last name?
Joel Marcus is the editor. He's also the co-writer, and Joel is my partner, a co-producer. And yeah, Joel was there.
Now, you say partner. Do you mean business partner or boyfriend?
Not boyfriend,
Oh.
but you know, we became a team because it was just me solo making this film, and then suddenly Joel became my editor, and he has so many skills and he's so seasoned and he was so passionate, and it just became a real joy to be making this film in a working partnership. And we also, there's a lot of tragedy, and he managed to find a lot of jokes as well, which made it easier.
Now, Joel Marcus, is that a pseudonym? Is that like John Stewart Leibowitz, where he drops the Jewish last name and then has two first names?
No, he kept the Jewish last name, right? No, it's Joel's from London, Joel Marcus, and he's a great editor. He made um, you know, his commercials screened at Cannes and won awards there. High-end European, you know, the sort of sexy, really witty commercials that the Europeans and the Brits are so good at. And he made music videos with, you know, the top groups at that time. And also he started out at the BBC. So he's just had a huge mix. He's done a lot of music videos, Joan Jett, and these films were celebrated at Sundance and also Tribeca. So
Did he also edit that Joan Jett documentary?
yeah, he produced it and edited it, both. He co-produced it and he edited it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was at the world premiere of that at
Oh,
Sundance.
you
I
were?
really enjoyed it. We got to
Yeah.
see some like private concert with her. That was very cool.
Yeah. And then another one he did was, I think it's called I Am DJ AM or some famous DJ.
Yeah.
But it was about his challenges with drugs, etc. Just an insight into his life.
Yeah, and he died tragically, DJ
Yes,
AM. Yes. Yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't realize that was Joel.
that was Joel. And again, he was a co-producer on that as well as the editor.
So let's get to this Austin Chronicle article.
Yeah. Hey.
It's a review at the Austin Film Festival, a counterpart to Christopher Nolan's biopic about one man's race to become death. Lois Lipman's First We Bomb New Mexico captures the real-life counter-crusade of one of Oppenheimer's countless unsung American victims. The film, which took home Best Documentary Award at Austin Film Festival, centers on Tina Cordova, an independent businesswoman who, after learning that she had thyroid cancer, becomes the voice of a long neglected, ignored, and lied to communities still being devastated by America's first nuclear bomb test, codenamed Trinity. But this David versus Goliath story is about as one sided as it gets. In one corner, we've got a poor, mostly blue collar Hispanic and Native American community that have had to learn to live with 5 generations of multiple types of cancer and
Yep.
induced deaths. Not to mention the myriad exorbitant treatments to cripple their economic prospects.
Mhm.
In the other corner, there's the word of Uncle Sam's Atomic Energy Commission, whose unofficial policy, according to some, was to never admit that anyone had been harmed by radiation. And that was from day one when the official line concerning the 7 mile high mushroom cloud in the sky, that was the unofficial policy of the US. Do you know any more about that?
Professor Kate Brown, emeritus at MIT, who's written 3 celebrated exposés about nuclear disasters that were covered up and misrepresented till Kate got into it and did her research. And I particularly remember Kate saying that General Groves' MO was to never admit about the radiation because he was scared that perhaps it would be considered a war crime or violation. So just pretend it doesn't exist. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but the government has denied forever that the radiation would harm people, even though it knew it was dangerous. I mean, for example, when one of the, I guess it's a controller, one of the fellows in the military who had a job of, as soon as the bomb went off, of driving from one spot to the next spot to, in a very slipshod way, measure the radiation. And he left his gas mask in by accident at one stop. And so he grabbed his Wonder Bread sandwich and took the white bread and stuck it over his mouth until he got to the next measurement point where he got another gas mask. And certainly all the military, they had been warned by the doctors, you need to evacuate residents because it's going to be really, really dangerous, including in Carrizozo, where one of our characters, Paul Pino, is a major character, and so many people have died there. And again, General Groves just rebuffed them. He didn't want anybody to know about this, of course, before the strike, but in Japan. But even after that, he feared litigation. He did not want to give any case for litigation. So he just denied it. And they never got the proper measurements about any of the toxic chemicals that were released on people who were living off the water and living off the land. And suddenly their land and water was radiated and they didn't know it. But everybody else from the military who did know it, they left immediately.
Did you have a great screen, some great screenings in Austin? And I read on your Instagram that they added a third screening.
Yeah, no, we had incredible screenings in Austin. And they scheduled us for 2 screenings and then, of course, gave us this incredible award. And then a few days after that, I got a call from the head programmer, Andy Voss, saying, "Hey, Lois, it's our closing night and we're going to show one feature film. And would you be okay if we showed your film?" So, of course, I was thrilled. I wish I'd stayed on because it's so great to meet the audience and they always have questions and to engage. But yeah, people were going up to both myself and Joel and engaging. We like, this is not just a film, and I believe it's a great film and a beautiful film and a great story, but it's also a grassroots movement.
Lois, we were just reading from the Austin Film Fest review in the Austin Chronicle about the film. They have a ton of nice things to say. And
And so some volunteers were at the Q&A, they were handing out clipboards at Austin with pens and asking everybody who wanted to if they would please write their email. And every single viewer wrote their email. I mean, everybody wanted to be part of this. And what can happen out of that is that there can be strategic campaigns to try to flip certain legislators, like a representative in Texas whose vote they need in the House to get REIC expanded, because the legislation for compensation for all these ignored victims of our nuclear age, it's already overwhelmingly passed in the Senate, and it just needs to have more support in the House. But everybody wanted to participate. It was incredible.
when you say RICA expanded, that's the law that they used to prosecute Al Capone?
No, that's, yeah, RICO. That's RICO. This is RICA, RECA, and that stands for Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. So since 1990, which was a long time ago, some of the parts of the states that were harmed from the Cold War nuclear testing in Nevada, they have gotten compensation. The victims of the world's first nuclear bomb, Trinity, in New Mexico, were mysteriously excluded from that legislation. They've never been acknowledged. They've never been helped. They've never been given health care. And that's why they lose everything trying to help a loved one who's got cancer, and then the next person gets sick, and that's what happens in New Mexico. So Tina, first she saw that everybody in her little village, including her father and then herself indeed, and everybody was getting sick from cancer, and she formed a movement for acknowledgement and for help. Then she discovered that it was straight across southern New Mexico and elsewhere. And she discovered that, hey, Congress passed something that was giving compensation to later victims in other states, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. But curiously, they have just ignored New Mexico. So then that became Tina's mission, the goal of the downwinders, to get the votes. It's the easiest lift, to get the votes in Congress to expand this legislation to include New Mexico. And it won't just include New Mexico. They're the people who paid the price for our nuclear legacy cross a lot of states, and they've just been abandoned. So this would give them some compensation and free health care, which is the most important thing. And it goes through multi-generations. It's interesting. I'm going to screen our film in St. Louis next, in 2 weeks at the St. Louis Film Festival, and it's at Washington University. So they have the same story. There are these mothers of Coldwater Creek who all their children were dying. And it turned out that the same Manhattan Project had a little industry over in East St. Louis, and they were dumping nuclear material, and it got into the water system. These mothers they went to DC to lobby. I mean, they've been there many times, but just a couple months ago, they went to DC at the same time that Tina and the Trinity downwinders and the native uranium miners went to DC, and they all paired up and they all lobbied legislators together. And so I'm going to be screening there, and I hope that, you know, we can get media interest in this story, which comes together of these courageous mothers.
What is it about New Mexico that we're always last on the list, or we always seem to come in last?
It's not my area. I certainly noticed those statistics, but I think that a lot of it is the nuclear industry, which, you know, people just haven't been able to get on their feet. There's so many people that have gotten sick and died and lost everything. You know, it's just hard to stand up and recover. And then there's, you know, one of the most powerful industries in the country, and that's the nuclear industry. And it's in New Mexico with the most, among the most wealthy population in the country. So you've got this little island of Los Alamos with the wealthiest people. I think it's the third wealthiest in the country, certainly the most educated, and among the very best schools for their kids. And right outside of that are the number one worst schools in the United States for the native people who mostly come in to do the dangerous, dirty cleanup jobs. It's not a fair playing field for really recovering and excelling. And you certainly need great schools.
Yeah, from what I understand, is the biggest employer in the state is the state, and then in second and third place are the two labs, the Air Force Base and then Los Alamos National Labs. But I guess let's read some more of this Austin Chronicle article. That was from day one, when the official line concerning the 7 mile high mushroom cloud in the sky came from an ammunition dump that had exploded and that there was nothing to worry about. That despite the high winds and storm clouds that were sure to spread and the nuclear fallout of the dirtiest of bombs, packed with more plutonium than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there was no need to evacuate. Meanwhile, the scientists got away from the Trinity site. Unfortunately, for much of the rest of the country, the radiation clouds cut a huge swath from New Mexico through North Texas and much of the heartland on its way up through Maine and the Atlantic. And no one said a word to any of those Americans just living their lives during those most fateful of days. So, literally, the fallout is immeasurable. But the brunt of that hellish firestorm was first felt by those poorer, browner communities that had settled those plains long before the scientists showed up, confiscated a large plot of land via eminent domain, and then dropped a bomb with so much poison that at least 300 babies died from drinking their mother's radioactive breast milk.
Pretty terrible.
Yeah, that is tragic.
And
Tell me
covered
about,
up. And
yeah, the babies
covered,
dying and
yeah, that was denied and covered up. And it was Bob Alvarez had documents, and eventually he, you know, exposed it, and it was published in, I don't know, the nuclear physicist, some academic journal, this expose that, again, the government knew about it and it sat on it and lied. But yeah, babies were the first victims.
And the article goes on to say, after that, the litany of grief is never ending. From the young Texas girls at a New Mexico campsite throwing warm radioactive snowballs at each other, all but one dying of cancer by 35, to the woman who lost 14 relatives, another lost 18, and one survivor buried all 10 of her siblings, along with 3 sons. And the man whose family moved to New Mexico in the 90s when he was 10, years later, married and planning for a family in California. He gets diagnosed with a rare brain cancer and agrees to go on camera while his unflappable wife helps him with his experimental treatments so that the others might not have to suffer such tragedies. Even Cordova's niece recently got her cancer diagnosis, something their family considers almost inevitable and which continues to spur this grueling 18 years effort, during which she helped produce a short community college documentary that caught the notice of Emmy and Peabody award winning Lipman, who got the backing for a feature-length documentary that follows Cordova as she records these tales of woe on her way to DC, where after 75 years, her proverbial stone finally dings Goliath's skull, forcing 61 U.S. senators to vote to extend Kennedy's 1963 nuclear test ban treaty so that her people might finally get the reparations from a government that bombed its own people. She needs a majority of the House to reconcile their version of the legislation by June of 2024 before the treaty expires. At the first screening of the Austin Film Festival, at the first screening at the Austin Film Festival, Tina Cordova urged a thoroughly moved audience to call their members of Congress and vote for their support. Guy, that is a very nice review.
And that legislation is what Tina is trying to get the New Mexico included in, and the native uranium miners. And they've been fighting tooth and nail to try to get traction. So it was supposed to be only for 30 years, from 1990 to 2020. And although Tina and the Downwinders didn't succeed at the last minute to get it expanded, they did get overwhelming support by Congress to give them 2 more years to battle it out, to fight for all these unrecognized victims, people who got sick, and their families. So the 2-year additional extension sunsets. It expires in June. So that's the urgency. You know, the clock is ticking. And really, we've won the support of the Senate overwhelmingly. And now they need to get the support of the House, and that's where they're targeted. I don't know how much you want to go into this, but there is an interesting story. Tina and the New Mexico Downwinders and the victims of East St. Louis nuclear waste from the same Manhattan Project, they all converged in Congress. And well, let me backtrack. The reason why it got passed in the Senate was because it had been proposed 12 times and it never got on the floor. It never got anywhere. But actually, Tina saw Josh Hawley on a C-SPAN, you know, the Republican from Missouri, and he was passionate, pleading that his constituents from St. Louis who were dying from this exposure from the Manhattan Project, that they get some bloody help. And so Tina went, Jesus, why? She called up Lujan, Senator Lujan's office, and said, who is fighting so hard for the New Mexico Downwinders, and said, why don't you negotiate? Why don't you reach across the aisle to Josh Hawley and say, we're going to help you if you help us. And that's exactly what happened. And they got, Josh Hawley talked all of his Republican senators to vote for the expansion of RECA. And that's why, you know, this was 12 times that it failed. And then suddenly, with this bipartisan support and this bromance of these 2 senators on both sides of the aisle, the impossible was achieved. And so what we're hoping is that Josh Hawley, you know, will have equal success with these transient Republican representatives in the House. And if he can get their support, then before June, then it's going to be transformational in the way it's going to help New Mexico, in the way these communities that have been so impoverished are going to get an infusion of money and the ability to send their kids to university and to buy a new car or to buy a house or to give some money to the next generation instead of just spending it all on healthcare.
God, what a fun show. I'm just so thrilled about all the success you're having. I can't wait to see what's next for the movie. You're getting a lot of opportunities and a lot of invites. Some of them are even showing up in my email. Tell me just a little bit about how exciting all of this is, how well it's gone after working so many years to finish the movie. Is this even better than you could have expected?
Oh, God, yes. Oh God, yes. I mean, I don't think I ever allowed myself to feel how I might feel when the film is out. I just was working so hard on this for at least 8 years, and so much of it solo until I started working with Joel. It's just extraordinary. It's really the greatest moments in my life to release this film, this beautiful film that we've worked on so hard to the public, and then have people love it. And I mean, to get your audience award, how could you want anything more important than to win the audience award? Jacques, I just can't tell you. I mean, I remember sitting in, for example, I never dreamed, right? I was sitting in the awards luncheon at Austin, and there were hundreds of filmmakers and writers, because it's a great writers festival as well. And they were handing out some awards, and then I heard them say, and this film tells the story of the dark underbelly of Oppenheimer and gives voice to the people. And then I went, holy moly, are they talking about our film? It was like, it was so extraordinary, to hear them call out our film and celebrate it. And oh my God, it's the first time I've had this experience. And yeah, it's better than anything I could have imagined.
And do you think your background as a news person helped play into your ability to tell the story so succinctly, so in such a compelling way?
I reflect now and realize that all of my background has led me to this point. And certainly being a radio journalist, a local radio journalist for 3 years, telling stories quickly and cutting them and getting to the point and doing live on-air broadcasts of news events helped me. And then television journalist and on the road for 60 minutes, I just developed a knack to get into places, to have doors open, to people trusted me and I trusted them, and to recognize heroes like Tina, who you want to listen to, who make everybody care. I mean, a story on its own is not maybe so compelling, but when you have this amazing person expressing it and you hear their intimate thoughts and life. Yeah. Anyway, all of that has brought me to the skills that I have today. And I have to say that my co-producer and editor, Joel Marcus, crafted the most beautiful film. And there's no way we would have what we have today without his tremendous effort and his love, passion.
Now, did you and Joel fight a lot throughout this? Was there a lot of tension and contentious moments about what you wanted versus what he wanted?
We never fought. It's funny. We saw eye to eye. We ended up having the same taste in music. We had a lot of conversations before we ever began working on the film. And I wanted to make sure that we were coming from the same place and we had similar values. And Joel cares passionately about social justice. And although he'd been very, very successful as a high-end commercial editor, et cetera, it got a little boring. And he wanted to do a film that he really could care about. And he gave his all. And no, we actually talked about it, that we never, ever fought. But we had a freedom in our communication that we both were able to speak absolutely honestly about, if we disagreed about things, about our disagreements. And Joel, as my editor, ultimately, if, it came to crunch, he always accepted my decision as the producer director. But it was just a phenomenal experience to work with Joel.
And I think putting together those teams is so important. People always talk about Scorsese and De Niro doing Mean Streets. And
Mhm.
I think so much of movies come from the passion of an individual, but then the second part of that is recruiting a team of people to help you make the movie. It's not just a movie with First We Bomb New Mexico, you're also doing something positive in the community through this movement that
Mhm,
is wrapped up in it. Do you want to
mhm.
say anything about that before we go?
It's a grassroots movement. And I didn't have the funding that we needed. It's a movement, and it's also with our legislators. Both the legislators who are the authors of this, they both tragically lost family members to the radiation in New Mexico from the labs. There's so many people who've been personally harmed by this, and so many people have stepped up to passionately give their all to making this film succeed and be as great as it is, and to getting it out into the world. So I'm so grateful to everyone. If you want to become part of this movement, just go onto our website, firstwebombnewmexico.com.
This was Lois Lipman, the director of First We Bomb New Mexico. Check it out at firstwebombnewmexico.com, and we'll see you next week. What it says at the end that June 2024 is a deadline. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Um, it's the deadline of this legislation that was passed in 1990 by Congress called RECA, Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, to give some compensation to victims of the later Nevada nuclear Cold War testing, but left out left out New Mexico.